So we started a whole screening program with natural compounds, and the one that stood out is the molecule that I'll be talking about. It's called Urolithin A, and the origins of the molecule are in our food and diet. So a lot of dietary precursors, and these are called polyphenols, such as ellagitannins. These are present in pomegranates. These are present in all the berries, the healthy berries, and pecans and walnuts. When you take them and you ingest them, now, if you're eating the right diet, then you need to have a second important thing in the chain, which is your gut microbiome. If you have a right gut microbiome, you will naturally produce this molecule. But in our clinical studies, we are seeing that about 60 to 70% of the people at the healthy adults don't make this molecule, which means either A, they're not eating right, or B, they don't have the right gut microbiome. I think I eat right, but my body, I can drink 6 glasses of pomegranate juice. My body will never make the metabolite or the microbiome derived metabolite, just because it's never had the sort of the right gut microbiome. So this sort of led to the idea of direct supplementation, and our studies today are showing that when you supplement this molecule, it leads to healthier mitochondria, and it does that. And so most of our work in the start was done with research labs here in the Swiss Institute of Technology, with the lab of Professor Johann Albrechts, who's a famous mitochondrial scientist. And Johann has been behind the discoveries of Resveratrol and the NAD modulators and several other drugs even. And we gave him this compound essentially without telling him what it was. And he started playing with the precursors, which you see the ellagitannins. If you, in these sort of aging models of worms, the C. elegans, when you would give them in the diet of worms, the ellagitannins, he was not seeing any impact on health span or lifespan. But when he gave Urolithin A in the diet of these worms, they started living about 45 to 50% longer. And he came running to our company, and he said, "Well, what have you given me? This is the best molecule I've ever worked with." And so that led to sort of, where we are today, 10 years down the road. And so from there, we went and gave it to older animals. 6 weeks of supplementation led to dramatic improvements in grip strength and aerobic endurance by about 60%. And this was, of course, published several years back in Nature Medicine. Now, how does that happen has been a fascinating area of research for us. We have targeted the effects of how Urolithin A works on mitochondria to a very well conserved aging pathway called mitophagy. And essentially what is mitophagy is, if you look at the life cycle of a mitochondria here, you go from being very healthy with healthy mitochondria in your cells to accumulating oxidative stress and reactive oxygen species pretty much as you age or you get stressed. And what happens even down the road with aged people, when you're in older adults, about 60, 70 and down the road, is that your cells accumulate these faulty or damaged goods, sort of the damaged mitochondria, and they cannot clean them out very well. So think of it like your recycling bin in your home, where you've accumulated a lot of trash, but if you're not cleaning it out, then of course your home will not smell well. And that's exactly what's happening in our cells. So what Urolithin A does is basically reactivates and revs up this cleaning waste disposal machinery, and packages these faulty mitochondria into sort of a targeted autophagy in the mitochondria called mitophagy. And that leads to sort of, again, the building blocks that contributes to healthier, newer mitochondria, which is a process called biogenesis. How does it differ from other, let's say, other known molecules out there that impact mitochondrial health? Now, there are several modulators of mitochondrial biogenesis. I only show nutritional ones here, but of course there are drugs like rapamycin and metformin that also hit biogenesis and energy production. And of course, there's things like resveratrol and NAD supplementation and CoQ10 and creatinine. But where I think this discovery sits is that unless you clean the system with mitophagy, you're not going to get optimal energy production. You're not going to get biogenesis that is very optimal. And so that's sort of where the sweet spot of Urolithin A discovery is. Since our first papers, a lot of interest around this molecule. Scripps has just published a paper. They've started looking at osteoarthritis patients, and in different models of osteoarthritis, where also they see that there's increased decline in mitophagy in the joints. And then by giving Urolithin A, they see increased mitophagy in the joint tissue and less inflammation. This is work that was published. The National Institute of Aging published a couple of years back in a Nature Neuroscience paper, where they basically took out of 1,000 molecules and they were screening them in models of Alzheimer's disease. Actually, the top one that came up in their profiling was Urolithin A, where it showed effects in reducing amyloid beta plaques, on neuroinflammation, and even improved a lot of the pathophysiology. And even at the Buck, they have got a $3 million grant to now study this molecule for Alzheimer's disease. So what have we done in the company? We have done basically a proprietary formulation of a synthesized molecule of Urolithin A. And what we see, actually, we've run a number of trials. So this is a trial done in the US. This is 100 people. When we call them into the diet, I told you before that some of us can make this molecule. What we see in a metropolitan area, and this is Chicago, by the way, in the US, out of 100, we only saw 12% of the people make this molecule. So that means, well, they were doing it right. They're eating their berries and nuts. Now, if we take the same 100 people and we actually provide them the right diet, so we provided them a pure glass of pomegranate juice, only about 40% of the people converted. And then we actually called them back and gave them the sort of calibrated supplementation with 500 milligrams of Urolithin A to bypass the natural conversion. You get about a 6-7-fold higher boost. And that's the levels that we call them the therapeutic range to sort of get the desired health benefits. And we have looked at the microbiome of these people who can make and who cannot make. And the answer is long and probably will need a bit much longer discussion, but it boils down to your gut microbiome and how rich and diverse it is. So it's a fascinating molecule. We have done a number of clinical trials. Until last year, I was always coming with one because that was the only one that we had published in Nature Metabolism a few years back. I had shown you data basically from older adults who run marathons, and when we did skeletal biopsies, so each column is a subject, each row is a mitochondrial gene. Blue means the mitochondria are not in good shape, red means they are happy, or a lot of them are expressed in the muscle. So people who exercise a lot, who are training for marathons and half marathons, when you biopsy them and look at their muscle, it looks a lot of red, which means a lot of mitochondria. The sort of sedentary couch potatoes, we don't see it, a lot of blue. In the older adults now, when we take the similar sedentary aged older adults and we do our RCT for 4 weeks and we do muscle biopsies again, we don't see much happening in the placebo group, and we see a dose-dependent increase in upregulation of mitochondrial genes in the skeletal muscle. And so that led us to do and launched further studies, 2 of which have just got published earlier this year. One is a trial done in older adults. This is all in a partnership with the University of Washington, where we took older adults and they're all healthy, but they don't move around too much. And they took it for 2 to 4 months. And then we make them do certain exercises in the hand and leg. And here's just showing you the leg exercise results. When they come back after 2-4 months, we don't see much of a change in the placebo. But in the MitoPure or the Urolithin A group, there's a close to about a 20% improvement in resistance to fatigue, which means basically they have more endurance, so they're able to do the exercise much longer. We have gone in and asked the question, will it only work for older adults who have some sort of decline in mobility happening, or can we go a bit on the left side of the aging curve and start early? So we've gone in after the 40 to 50-year-olds in this trial. This is another trial that we just published in Cell Medicine around the middle half of this year. And in this similar story, we again looked at the leg strength here, and these are overweight adults. So they, again, being sedentary, they also sort of have a higher BMI. And again, we see similar improvements in sort of improvement, statistical improvement of strength. And where we are today now is basically we've started exploring things beyond, because every time you run sort of, and a lot of companies will face this in their translation pathway, you can't just biopsy in every study, and most people get turned off with biopsy. So we started looking at more the sort of what are these other systemic signatures of mitochondrial health that we can pick up. And so we've started looking at immune cells, and we think it's a very good window to look at somebody's mitochondrial health. So here, from the study I showed you in the muscle, where we have published that we can improve with Urolithin A, a lot of mitochondrial gene expression. We have taken the immune cells, and we see the same. We see the same signature in mitochondria in the immune cells, and that has led us to sort of a much bigger program in clinical that we have launched. So in addition to muscle, where we have a number of studies. So we are stretching the boundaries even more. We are going after elite athletes. So we have a study wrapping up soon in Australia, where you would think that elite athletes have optimal mitochondrial function, but they suffer from what is called as overtraining syndrome that also impacts their sort of mitochondrial health. And so we are looking at their recovery and performance. And then we are going after hospitalized people who, believe it or not, also need nutrition to sort of get out of the hospital faster, and the longer they stay, the more muscle wasting they will have. And we have 2 immune studies, one, again, looking at more the mitochondrial function of immune cells, and the second one, we have just got awarded $1 million grant from the Swiss government here, looking at post-cancer patients who also basically have a zero immune system and have suffered from fatigue. So we are doing that. And then on the skin front, we are actually looking at topical applications of MitoPure into sort of the next generation of our products that our company will launch. I mentioned this already. We have several top universities and labs that are working on it, that we have active collaborations. So we are about to launch trials with partnership with the University of Lausanne. We are working in grants with Harvard, Northwestern, name it, all the top universities.